You're not in a market this time, you're in a cave. The fire is low. It's roughly 300,000 years ago, and there are maybe 12 people in your entire world. Your group, your people. The ones you hunt with, sleep near, share food with, and one of them isn't moving. They were moving yesterday. They were breathing yesterday. They helped drag the kill back to camp yesterday, and now they're just stopped. Same face, same body, same person, but completely, utterly, impossibly still. Every other animal on Earth would walk away. A lion doesn't sit beside a dead Pride member and wonder. A bird doesn't stare at a fallen companion and ask questions. A fish doesn't feel the absence of another fish and lie awake thinking about it. But you don't walk away. You stop. You stare. And somewhere in the back of your early human brain, 3 questions form that have never existed in any mind on Earth before this moment. What just happened? Where did they go? Is that going to happen to me? Those 3 questions are the most dangerous thoughts in the history of life on this planet, because once you ask them, you cannot unask them. They don't go away. They don't get easier. They just sit there, in the back of every human mind that has ever existed, waiting. And every single attempt to answer them, across 300,000 years, across every culture, every continent, every civilization that has ever risen and fallen, has shaped everything you see around you. Religion, art, architecture, war, law, the pyramids, the concept of heaven, the fear of hell, the rituals you still practice today without knowing why. All of it traces back to this moment. One group, one body, one species that looked at death and refused to just move on. We didn't build civilizations despite being afraid of death. We built them because of it. This is what ancient humans thought about death, and it is stranger, darker, and more interesting than anyone ever told you. Let's go. Here's what you probably assume happened. Early humans died. Other early humans got sad. Eventually, someone invented the idea of an afterlife to make everyone feel better. Heaven appeared. Hell appeared. Rituals followed. Clean progression. Logical development. The kind of story that makes sense and doesn't require too much thinking. That is not what happened. The earliest evidence doesn't point to heaven, doesn't point to reincarnation, doesn't point to any afterlife concept you'd recognize from any modern religion anywhere on Earth. It points to something much simpler and much stranger. Ancient humans thought the dead were still there. Not gone to another realm, not waiting somewhere peaceful, not dissolved into the universe, still here, still present, still watching, still capable of helping you or hurting you, depending entirely on how well you treated them. And the evidence for this is genuinely hard to argue with. Neanderthals, not even modern humans, a completely separate species, buried their dead with objects, tools placed beside bodies, food remains left at grave sites, ochre, a red mineral pigment, painted onto the body before burial. Red means blood, blood means life. They were literally painting life back onto someone who had lost it, not as decoration, as intervention, as an attempt to do something useful for someone they believed was still in some sense present. You only pack someone's bag if you think they're going somewhere and might need things. You only leave food beside someone if you think they might still get hungry. This wasn't decoration. This was practical logic based on a very specific belief. The dead weren't gone. They were just different, and if they were still there, still watching, still present, still capable of acting, then you had better treat them correctly, because getting it wrong had consequences, real ones. The kind that could ruin your harvest, sicken your children, or turn your luck permanently bad. That belief is the root of almost every funeral ritual still practiced anywhere on Earth today. The flowers on the grave, the food offerings, the candles, the prayers spoken out loud to someone who cannot physically hear them. You inherited all of it. From people who lived before writing existed, before cities existed, before the concept of a god had even fully formed. The first thing humans ever believed about death wasn't heaven. It was that the dead never really left. Once you believe the dead are still present, one question follows immediately. What do they want? And that question, that single terrifying question, produced more human behavior than almost anything else in history. You start feeding them. Across ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and Rome, families left food and drink at burial sites on regular schedules. Not once at the funeral, regularly, seasonally. The dead needed ongoing maintenance just like the living did. Miss a feeding and something bad might happen. Your crops might fail, your children might get sick. Your luck might turn in ways you couldn't explain and couldn't reverse. You start talking to them. Ancient cultures across every continent developed practices of speaking directly to the dead, asking for guidance, asking for protection, asking for forgiveness. The dead became advisors. The dead became judges. The most important members of the family were sometimes the ones who had already died. Your ancestors weren't history. They were active participants in your daily life. You consulted them before major decisions. You appeased them before planting season. You reported back to them after a hunt. You start building for them. And here is where it gets genuinely extreme. The pyramids of Egypt are not just tombs. They are houses. Fully equipped houses with furniture, food, boats, clothing, jewelry. Weapons and painted servants on the walls designed to come to life and serve in the afterlife. Everything a person would need to continue existing comfortably. Forever. You built this because you genuinely believed they were going to need it. Not symbolically. Literally. The Great Pyramid of Giza took approximately 20 years to build, tens of thousands of workers, an almost incomprehensible amount of resources. All of it for one dead person. And here is the part that should actually stop you. Every single one of these practices required the living to spend enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources on people who were no longer alive. Ancient humans regularly, deliberately, chose the dead over the living. They fed the dead before they fed themselves in lean years. They built for the dead before they built for their own families. They consulted the dead before they made decisions for the living. That tells you exactly how seriously they took this. Not as a superstition, not as primitive thinking. As the most rational response possible to what they genuinely believed was true. At some point the idea shifted. The dead weren't just lingering here anymore. They went somewhere, and where they went said everything about what a society believed, what it valued, and most importantly, what it was afraid of. The Egyptians built one of the most elaborate afterlife systems ever conceived. You died. Your body was preserved, mummified, wrapped, protected because you were going to need it again. Your heart was removed and weighed on a scale against a feather, the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you passed into the field of reeds, a perfect Egypt, eternal abundance. Everything good about life, forever, without the bad parts. If your heart was heavier than the feather, if you had lied, cheated, caused harm, lived badly, a creature called Ammit was waiting. Part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. She ate your heart, and you ceased to exist, completely, permanently, not punished. Just gone, no hell, no eternal suffering, just deletion. The Greeks had something darker, the underworld, Hades, a gray, joyless, dim place where almost everyone ended up regardless of how they lived. Not punishment, not reward, just continuation without the good parts. The Greek afterlife was deeply, deliberately pessimistic. It said that death was worse than life no matter what you did and no matter how you lived. Which explains a lot about why Greeks were so obsessed with glory, with legacy, with doing things that would be remembered. If the afterlife was going to be miserable for everyone, you had better make absolutely certain the living part counted for something. The Mesopotamians agreed. Their underworld was called the Land of No Return, a dusty, dark, silent place where the dead ate clay and wore feathers as clothing, not punishment, just existence. Death wasn't a sentence or a reward. It was just the sad, inevitable, undignified conclusion to everything. And then something shifted, something important. Some cultures started connecting how you lived to where you went. Moral afterlives, judgment, consequences that followed you past the moment of death. The idea that every choice you made while alive was being observed, recorded, and would eventually determine what happened to you for eternity. That idea is one of the most powerful behavioral systems ever invented. It doesn't require a police force. It doesn't require courts or witnesses or evidence. It requires only one thing: belief. And once you believe that someone is always watching and always keeping score, your behavior changes. Permanently. Completely. Even when nobody else is around, ancient humans didn't just imagine the afterlife. They used it. Here is the part nobody puts in the history books. Almost everything humans have ever built was built partly, sometimes mostly, to deal with the fact that we know we are going to die, not might die, not could die, will die, definitely, inevitably. And we have known this, consciously, for at least 300,000 years. We are the only species on Earth that lives with that knowledge every single day. That should be paralyzing. It would be paralyzing. Except humans figured out a solution. Build things that last longer than you do, the pyramids, obviously. But also the first cities, built around temple complexes specifically designed to manage the relationship between the living and the dead. The first legal systems built partly to manage inheritance, which only matters because people die and leave things behind. First writing, tracking debts and obligations that needed to outlast the individual people who made them. The first art, cave paintings made by people who had no practical reason to make them except the deep human need to leave something behind that said I was here. There is a psychological theory called terror management theory. The idea is straightforward and uncomfortable. Humans are the only animals that are consciously aware of their own mortality. That awareness, that constant, unavoidable knowledge that you personally are going to stop existing, creates an anxiety so enormous that it should make normal functioning impossible. But it doesn't. Because humans do something extraordinary with that anxiety. They build culture. You join groups that existed before you and will continue after you. You follow belief systems that promise continuation in some form. You have children. You create things. You put your name on things. You work toward goals that will outlast your lifetime. All of it is the same impulse underneath. All of it is the same sentence being said in 1,000 different ways. I was here. I mattered. This doesn't end with me. The ancient Egyptian who spent 20 years building a tomb was saying that. The Neanderthal who painted red ochre on a dead body was saying that. The Greek soldier who charged into battle, hoping to be remembered, was saying that. And you, watching a video about what ancient humans thought about death, are saying exactly the same thing. The technology changed. Fear never did. So here is where we actually landed. Ancient humans didn't have one answer to death. They had thousands. Different cultures, different afterlives, different rituals, different rules. Different gods waiting at different gates with different scales and different punishments and different rewards. Some thought the dead stayed here. Some thought they went somewhere specific. Some thought behavior in life determined everything. Some thought death was the same gray nothing for everyone regardless. Some built pyramids, some dug pits, some burned everything, some preserved everything. None of them agreed, all of them tried. And here is the thing that should sit with you for a moment after this video ends. We still don't know. Not really. We have more scientific knowledge than any civilization that came before us by an enormous margin. We understand biology, chemistry, neuroscience, physics. We can describe exactly what happens to a body after death down to the molecular level. We still cannot tell you what happens to you. That question, the one that formed in the back of a human skull 300,000 years ago, beside a dying fire, in a cave, looking at a body that used to be a person, is still open. Still completely unanswered. Still the most important question anyone has ever asked and nobody has ever been able to fully answer. Ancient humans built pyramids trying to answer it. Carved gods into mountainsides, invented writing, invented cities, started wars, ended empires. Built entire civilizations as a direct response to not knowing. You watched a YouTube video about it. Which is, honestly, exactly the same impulse, just a different technology. What do you think happens after we die? Let me know in the comments. See you soon.